اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Last night we had begun with a narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Dawood al-Sijistani. Abu Dawood rahimahullah is one of Imam al-Bukhari's students. Actually, he's one of his most prominent students. It was also collected by Imam Ahmad. And Imam Ahmad is one of al-Bukhari's most prominent teachers. Actually, he is his most prominent of his shuyukh. This narration is on the authority of Abdullah ibn Umar, radiyallahu anhuma, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, إِذَا تَبَايَعْتُمْ بِالْعِينَةِ وَرَضِيتُمْ بِالزَّرْعِ وَأَخَذْتُمْ بِأَذْنَابِ الْبَقَرِ وتركتم الجهاد في سبيل الله سلط الله عليكم ذلا لا ينزعه حتى ترجعوا إلى دينكم. In this narration, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you start to deal in al-ina, and we took a whole few minutes last night to explain what the meaning of al-ina is, but it's not just that specific transaction that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referring to. He's referring more generally to an attitude, to a behavior. What is that behavior? Doing something haram that looks like it is halal outwardly. On the surface it looks halal, but in reality you're just doing something haram in a seemingly halal way. We gave an example of that from Sahih Muslim, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah prohibited the fat of animals upon Bani Israel. He prohibited that they consume the fat of animals or that they sell it and profit from it. And so what did they do? They melted it and they changed its outward appearance, and then they sold it and consumed the profits from that sale. This is worse than if they would have just eaten it. Because if they were to just do something haram, it will always be, this is haram. And may Allah forgive me. But when they do it this other way, they go this very roundabout way to doing it, but they know it's haram, and they're still doing something haram, this now becomes doubly impermissible. Because now you're doing something haram, but you're changing the outward appearance of it to make it look like it is halal, as if you're going to get over on Allah in a technicality. The same thing Allah tells us in Surah Al-A'raf, that they were prohibited from fishing on Saturday, on the Sabbath. So they put their nets out on Friday night, and they collected them on Sunday, on Saturday night or Sunday morning, right? And they said, well, we weren't fishing, our nets were fishing, right? This behavior is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking about. Who does this behavior? The person who does this behavior is a person who wants the dunya and the akhirah together equally. But if they have to choose, they'll take the dunya over the hereafter. That is the behavior. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that if this behavior becomes prevalent, he says, and you all are contented with farming, and you take and hold to and follow the tails of cattle. This portion here is speaking about, first of all, we do what is haram, but we give it a different appearance to make it halal, right? And then the second thing is that we are contented with tilling our land and just being in our land and not going out there, not taking any risks, right? We're completely consumed by the dunya and just taking care of things and everything in its right place, right? And not rocking the boat. When he says, and you take the tails of cattle, what's meant by this is usually cattle would be used to till the ground, right? So he's saying if the Muslims start making the bulk of their time about earning the dunya and not spreading Islam, and doing that which is haram, but giving it a different appearance so that it appears halal. He says, وَتَرَكْتُمُ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and you abandon jihad fi sabilillah, Allah will concentrate upon you all a humiliation that will not be removed until you return back to your true religion. Now, when he talks about jihad here, jihad is an obligation upon every Muslim everywhere. What are you talking about, Sheikh? Jihad in the Quran is two types. There is jihad that is physical jihad, what the scholars refer to as jihad with the sword. And there is jihad which is jihad of knowledge, which is spreading Islam, propagating Islam, defending Islam, arguing for Islam, learning Islam. This is jihad. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever leaves his house and emerges to seek knowledge, wherever it may be, is considered to be having the reward of a mujahid until he comes back into his house from that endeavor, right? Seeking knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuha rasul jahid al-kuffara wal-munafiqeen. He says, O messenger, fight against the disbelievers and the hypocrites. The disbelievers, meaning in war. The hypocrites, they're not fought physically. They are fought with knowledge, with argument, right? And that is why all of the scholars of Islam agree unanimously that zakah is to be spent upon the military and spent upon the students of knowledge and the scholars of Islam. Even if they're wealthy, they're still given a portion of zakah. Why? Because this is considered to be fi sabilillah. A scholar, a student of knowledge, someone who is seeking Islamic knowledge or someone who is teaching Islamic knowledge, this is a mujahid. And this jihad is more relevant than mere jihad that is with the body. Physical jihad is not something that's available at all times everywhere in the world, right? However, jihad in the sense of learning Islam and propagating Islam, that is an obligation upon every Muslim to either do it himself or to aid in it being done. Ibn al-Qayyim said something very interesting, and we'll end with this. He made a statement in one of his books, Al-Furusiyya, which is a book all about jihad that he wrote. He said, فالجهاد جهادان جهاد بالسيف والسنان وجهاد بالقلم واللسان فمن لم يكن من أحد هذين الجهادين كان كلا على بني الإنسان. He said, rahimahullah, that jihad is two types. There is jihad of the sword and jihad of the tongue and the pen. And whoever is not associated or part of or supportive of or engaged in one of these two types of jihad at any time in his life, he is dead weight upon humanity. He is dead weight upon humanity. What are you alive for? What's the point? If we are not living to either propagate Islam or protect it, if we are not living by either practicing, propagating, learning the legacy of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or actively spreading it, what is the point of our life? What? To eat and drink and be happy sometimes and be sad other times? You know, it's fascinating when you ask people sometimes that don't believe in Allah or they have very weak belief, you know, to look into the mind of someone who doesn't believe in La ilaha illallah. You ask them, you know, what's the point of life? If there's no God, what's the point of our existence? Why? Why struggle? Why cry? Just get it over with. It's going to happen anyways. What point is there to life? They say, well, I make people feel good. You make them feel good? There's a million other things that's going to come right after you and make them feel terrible. And it's going to wipe that smile right off their face. Tragedy and disease and sickness and death and old age and all kinds of things. That is a momentary flash in the pan. It's not even a flash in the pan. Making people feel good is not a prerogative. Meaningful things are only that which which can transcend death. That is the only thing meaningful in our existence. Anything else that dies when we die and goes back into the box and gets recycled as soon as our soul leaves our body, that is, its existence and non-existence is equal. Therefore, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he makes this bold statement. He says, if you are not one of the mujahideen of one of these two types of jihad, or you're not supportive of it, the person who supports it with his wealth, with his time, person who volunteers, person who houses the students of knowledge, person who donates books. I'm not talking about the old books that your grandfather left you and you bring them to the masjid because you can't throw them in the garbage. I'm talking about, seriously putting pressure on yourself to make sure that this religion is taken care of and its victors are taken care of. What's the point of our life? What's the point of our money? What is the point of our efforts, our sweat? For us to be in a nice car and a nice house, well, that's all great. That's all very beautiful, but that is going to come to a swift end. And when we are taking our last breaths, we're going to look back at that and say, man, I wish I would have done more. And so the Prophet ﷺ says that when these traits become prevalent amongst the Muslims, humiliation will come and follow until the Muslims go back to their religion. He didn't say go back to jihad. Jihad is not all the religion of Islam. But he said until they go back to their religion, until they go back to conviction of what we say and what we read in the Quran. And we look at the Quran and we look at the akhirah as being primary and the dunya as being secondary. When those are our priorities, everything changes. And that change scares us, but that change is necessary for us to find any relevance in this life or the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He teach us and guide us, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala honor us and grant us nobility. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.